Lena had always believed in staying close to the work she built. Even though she was now the head of a company with hundreds of employees and several luxury jewelry stores across the country, she still liked showing up unannounced. Not to intimidate anyone, not to catch someone doing something wrong, but because she wanted to see people as they were. She believed that when leaders stepped away from the everyday world of customers and workers, they lost touch with what really mattered. So she made it a habit to visit different stores at random times, blending in, observing quietly, understanding what customers felt when they walked in. On a warm afternoon, she found herself with a free hour after a meeting ended earlier than planned. She looked at her reflection in the tinted window of her car and smiled. She wasn't dressed for business today. She had left the gym a little while ago and wore simple black leggings, a loose top, and her hair tied back. She looked nothing like the CEO of a successful luxury brand, and honestly, she liked that. It gave her a sense of freedom she rarely got in her usual world of formal meetings and polished smiles. She decided to stop by one of the company's most popular stores, a busy location known for its high-end clients and constant foot traffic. She had only visited this branch once during its grand opening. Since then, she had heard good things about the design, the layout, and the sales numbers. But she had never interacted with the current staff. That, she thought, made it the perfect moment to go in quietly and see how things worked when no one knew she was coming. When she stepped out of her car, she didn't carry anything flashy. No designer bag. No expensive jewelry except for the small necklace she never took off one she designed. Years before her company even existed, she walked toward the glass doors at a calm pace, enjoying the faint breeze that brushed past. When she entered, a soft chime rang above the door. Inside, the store was beautiful, just as she remembered. Soft lights glowed against polished surfaces, and each display case sparkled with the reflections of diamonds, emeralds, and gold. The store wasn't too crowded, but there were enough people browsing to keep the staff busy. A couple stood near the center display, admiring a pair of earrings, and two staff members stood with them, smiling warmly and explaining details. Another employee was polishing a glass surface, while another greeted a man who had just walked in. Everyone seemed engaged, and for a moment, Lena felt proud. She loved seeing people treated with care and respect. She stood by the entrance for a few seconds, expecting someone to greet her the way they greeted the others, but no one looked in her direction. They walked around her as if she wasn't there. She didn't think much of it at first. Maybe they were busy. Maybe they assumed she was with someone. She took a few steps inside, letting herself look around at the displays the way any customer might. Minutes passed, and still no one approached her. She moved slowly through the aisle, stopping near a glass case where a bracelet she designed last year was displayed. It was one of her favorites, created during a time when she needed a reminder of her own strength. The bracelet represented resilience and had become one of the store's best sellers. She waited near the case, expecting someone to eventually notice her interest. But again, no one looked up. She watched as another customer walked in, a woman dressed in a bright skirt and carrying a shiny purse. Within seconds, one of the employees rushed over to her with a friendly smile, offering help before the woman even looked around. Lena raised an eyebrow. It wasn't that she expected special treatment. She didn't even expect immediate attention, but it became clear that she was invisible to the staff. Still, she tried to stay patient. She didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe someone would come over once they noticed she was waiting. She walked around a little more, pretending to browse. Her footsteps were soft on the polished floor, and the quiet hum of soft background music filled the space. She passed a shelf of handcrafted rings, a row of watches, a set of pendants she approved months ago. Occasionally, a staff member glanced toward her, but the moment their eyes met hers, God, they looked away quickly as if she wasn't a customer worth approaching. She took another slow breath. She didn't want to assume anything negative. She always gave people space to correct themselves. Yet the feeling of being ignored, dismissed, or overlooked was something she knew far too well. In her earlier years, it happened often, long before she became successful. And even now, in certain situations, it still happened. But here inside a store she owned, that was a different kind of sting. Finally, She stepped toward the main counter where a supervisor stood arranging papers. The woman, whose badge read Kelly, didn't look up right away. Her posture was straight, her expression serious, and she seemed to be the type who kept everything tightly controlled. Lena stood quietly across from her, waiting for acknowledgement. A few seconds passed. "Excuse me," Lena said gently. Kelly lifted her eyes. But instead of greeting her warmly, she gave her a quick glance up and down. It wasn't a friendly look, more like a skeptical one, or annoyed. Lena couldn't tell at first. "Yes," Kelly said, her tone short and clipped. Lena offered a polite smile. "I was hoping to look at one of the bracelets in this case." She pointed to the display on the right. Kelly didn't move. She simply looked at Lena again, slower this time, as if she was trying to decide something silently. "You need an appointment to view items from that case," Kelly said. Lena's smile faded slightly. "Is that a new policy?" "I don't remember that rule. It's for certain customers," Kelly replied. "High-value pieces need to be shown only when there's a confirmed appointment." "That's interesting," Lena said calmly. "I saw another customer looking at pieces from that same case earlier." Kelly didn't like the comment. Her lips tightened. They had an appointment. Lena knew that wasn't true. She had been standing near the entrance when the couple walked in. She saw the staff greet them warmly without checking anything. Still, she didn't argue. "I understand," she said gently. "But I would still like to take a look if possible." Kelly crossed her arms. She didn't hide her annoyance. "Those pieces are extremely expensive. If you're not sure what you're looking for, maybe try the other section. We have items that are more accessible." "It's more accessible." The words landed heavier than they sounded. Lena felt her stomach tighten slightly. She kept her posture calm, her expression soft, but inside she felt a mix of disappointment and disbelief. Not anger. She rarely reacted with anger, but something closer to sadness, because she knew what accessible really meant in this moment. It wasn't about money or appointments. It was about what Kelly assumed about her at first glance. Still, Lena stayed composed. She didn't want to embarrass anyone or cause a scene. She only wanted to understand the situation clearly. "May I speak to another associate?" Lena asked softly. Kelly straightened even more. "All associates are busy, and I'm the supervisor. So anything you need goes through me." Lena nodded slowly, absorbing the response. She glanced around the room. She could see two employees chatting with customers who didn't seem to require much assistance. She saw another employee rearranging merchandise unoccupied. And she saw yet another staff member suddenly look away when she caught his eye. Almost like he wanted to help her, but didn't want to go against the supervisor. Lena had been patient long enough. She needed to see how far this would go. "All right," she said calmly. "Then could you simply unlock the case so I can view the bracelet up close? I don't need a long presentation." Kelly shook her head immediately. "I can't do that. These items aren't for casual browsing. You can check the sales section behind you." Lena didn't turn around. She didn't need to. The difference in tone, the dismissive body language, the clear unwillingness to help, she saw it all. She didn't need anyone to explain it. "Thank you," she said quietly. She stepped back from the counter and took a breath. Her voice was steady, her face calm, but inside she was already processing what she needed to do. She didn't want to confront Kelly in front of customers. She didn't want to make a scene. That was never her way. She preferred handling things with dignity. Even when others did not offer her the same, she reached into her pocket, not for her wallet, but for her phone. She typed a quick message, clear and simple, to someone who knew exactly what it meant when she texted at an unusual time. "Come to the downtown store now. Urgent." She slipped her phone back into her pocket and sat down on a bench near the entrance. She didn't look angry. She didn't even look upset. She looked like someone waiting for a friend, calm, quiet, observing. A customer nearby smiled at her, and she smiled back. A small, genuine moment of warmth in the midst of poor treatment. She watched the employees continue their work, the friendly greetings to others, the warm tone with the well-dressed customers, the way they made certain people feel welcome without effort. and then she watched how they avoided even glancing her way. A few minutes passed. Not many. Just enough. Long enough for her to see exactly what she needed to know, and long enough for the door to open. Again. As someone hurried inside, scanning the room until their eyes landed on her, Lena stood up slowly, her expression still calm, still collected. Everything was about to change, and she knew it. But she felt no rush. She simply took a soft breath and prepared for what needed to happen next. The moment Lena saw the regional manager step inside the store, she knew he had rushed. His hair was slightly out of place, and he was breathing just a little faster than usual, though he tried to hide it behind a professional expression. His name was Daniel, a calm and respectful man who had worked with her for years. He had always treated people with fairness, which was one of the reasons Lena trusted him with overseeing multiple locations. He scanned the room quickly, and when he spotted her sitting near the entrance, he hurried toward her with a worried look. Lena stood up slowly before he even reached her, and the shift in energy was noticeable enough that a few customers glanced their way. But she didn't want attention. She simply gave Daniel a gentle nod. "Is everything all right?" he whispered, clearly trying not to draw too much attention. Lena offered a small smile. "Take a look around first," she said quietly. "Start with the staff." Daniel didn't fully understand yet, but he respected her enough not to question her right away. He stepped back slightly and observed how the employees interacted with customers. Within seconds, he noticed the difference in their behavior. They were warm, chatty, and helpful with other customers. But they hadn't once approached Lena. Even now, some of them looked her way and then quickly looked elsewhere. Pretending to stay busy, Daniel's brows pressed together. He didn't like what he was seeing. "Who assisted you?" he asked softly. Lena didn't answer with words. She simply turned her head toward the supervisor at the main counter, the one still organizing paperwork with a sense of authority that didn't match her treatment of customers. The badge on her shirt still read Kelly. Daniel nodded slightly, understanding enough from Lena's glance alone. "Let me speak to her." He said no. Lena replied calmly. "Not yet. I want you to see it the way it is. Go as a normal customer. Stand somewhere nearby and observe. She might show you the same behavior." Daniel hesitated for a moment but nodded again. He understood the importance of seeing things without interference. So, he straightened his jacket, took a breath, and walked casually toward the bracelet display where Lena had been ignored earlier. He stood there for a few seconds, pretending to study a piece. Not long after, one of the employees approached him with a bright smile. "Good afternoon." "Sir," the employee said politely. "Is there anything I can help you look at today?" Daniel kept his tone neutral. "Just browsing for now. Thank you." "No problem at all," the employee replied kindly. "If you want to see anything from the case, just let me know. I'll be happy to help." Lena watched the exchange from a distance, her expression calm but thoughtful. Daniel walked back to her after a minute. "You were right," he said quietly. "Quite a difference. That isn't the whole story," Lena replied. "Let's see how she handles me again." They waited a moment longer, enough for the scene to settle. Then Lena walked back toward the main counter. Daniel stayed behind, far enough to not interfere but close enough to hear. When Lena reached the counter again, Kelly didn't look up immediately. She was writing something on a clipboard, her expression stiff. Lena waited patiently, giving her time to respond naturally. After a few seconds, Kelly finally lifted her gaze. Her expression remained neutral, but her eyes revealed the same quick judgment she had shown earlier. "Yes," she said again in that same clipped tone. Lena kept her voice steady and polite. "I'm interested in viewing the bracelet in the right display case. The one with the carved design?" Kelly exhaled sharply, almost like the request inconvenienced her deeply. "Like I already told you," she said, "those pieces are not available without a scheduled appointment." Lena nodded slowly. "And what do you require for setting such an appointment?" Kelly shrugged. "It usually needs to be reserved ahead of time, not something we do on the spot." Lena kept her eyes soft. "Is that your policy for everyone who comes to the store?" Kelly's expression changed slightly, as if she sensed a hidden meaning, but didn't want to acknowledge it. "Yes, that's the policy," she said flatly. Daniel's jaw clenched. He stood far enough not to be noticed, but close enough to hear every word. He watched with growing disbelief as Kelly continued to dismiss her. Two customers nearby also noticed the tone. One woman nudged her partner softly and whispered something. Another man frowned, looking uncomfortable with what he was witnessing. But Kelly seemed unaware. Or maybe she didn't care. "Look," she said, crossing her arms again. "If you're not here to make a serious purchase, I really recommend checking the more affordable pieces. They're over there." She pointed lazily toward the back corner of the store. Lena didn't even glance in the direction she pointed. She didn't need to. "And what makes you think I'm not here to make a serious purchase?" Lena asked gently. Kelly blinked, slightly thrown off by the calm question. She wasn't expecting to be challenged in such a soft tone. "Well," she said after a moment, "you came in without an appointment, and usually serious clients don't do that. They come prepared. They know what they want." "I do know what I want," Lena replied quietly. Kelly had no answer for that. She looked around the store, trying to regain her confidence by acting busy. "I'm sorry," she said abruptly, "but the policy is the policy. If you can't follow it, there isn't much I can do." Daniel had heard enough. He stepped forward slowly, his expression calm but firm. As he approached, Kelly's posture straightened. She recognized him. Most supervisors did. He was the regional manager after all. She said suddenly, her tone changing in an instant. "Hello, sir. I didn't know you were coming in today." Her voice became cheerful, too cheerful. Daniel gave a polite nod. "Good afternoon, Kelly." She smiled widely, nervous, but trying to maintain a professional appearance. "Is there something I can help you with?" "Yes," Daniel said, keeping his voice controlled. "I'd like to know why this customer has been denied service multiple times." Kelly's smile faded quickly. She glanced at Lena, then back at Daniel. Her lips parted, searching for an explanation. I wasn't denying service," she stammered. "I was just following policy." "What policy is that?" Daniel asked. Kelly swallowed. "The one about appointments. For viewing certain pieces." Daniel tilted his head slightly. "Which pieces require appointments?" Kelly hesitated again. Her confidence cracked. The high-value ones. The ones in that case?" And yet Daniel said gently, "When I was standing at the same case a few minutes ago, your staff offered to help me immediately." Kelly's face stiffened. She knew she had been caught. "Well, yes." But she stopped herself. She knew she was about to say something she couldn't take back. Daniel didn't press her. He calmly stepped aside and turned toward Lena. "Ma'am," he said respectfully, "I'm very sorry for how you've been treated. If you would like to see anything in this store, I will personally assist you." Kelly's head snapped toward him in shock. Only then did she look properly at Lena. Really look. For the first time, she seemed to notice the quiet confidence in her posture. The calm way she held herself, the maturity in her eyes. Something shifted in her expression, maybe confusion, maybe worry. But that shift came too late. Lena didn't smile or gloat. She simply looked at Daniel and gave him a gentle nod. "Thank you," she said softly. Daniel unlocked the case carefully and lifted the bracelet Lena had originally asked for. He placed it on a velvet pad and set it on the counter with the same care he gave to every important client. Lena looked at it for a moment, then looked at Kelly. "This bracelet," she said, keeping her tone natural, "was designed to represent strength and dignity. Two things that matter greatly to me." Kelly swallowed hard. "I approved every part of this design," Lena added softly. Every curve, every detail. Realization hit Kelly in pieces. First, confusion. Then shock. Then a quiet dread settling into her expression. She glanced at Daniel, who simply looked back at her with a firm, disappointed stare. "You approved the design?" Kelly asked quietly. "Yes," Lena said. Kelly's voice dropped even lower. "So you're..." She couldn't finish the sentence. Lena didn't help her. She simply let the truth settle into the space between them. Across the store, a few employees stood still, unsure of what was happening, but sensing the tension. The customers, too, had grown quiet, sensing something unusual was unfolding. Kelly's hands trembled slightly. She tried to hide it by folding them behind her back, but her panic was clear. Her usual confidence, her overbearing tone, her dismissive attitude, all of it had disappeared, replaced by an uncertain fragility. "Ma'am," she finally said in a weak voice. "I didn't know. It shouldn't matter if you knew," Lena said gently. The words weren't harsh. They weren't loud. But they cut deeper than anything she could have yelled. Kelly's eyes lowered. Unable to meet Lena's anymore, Lena touched the bracelet lightly, her fingertips brushing over the design she had created during a difficult time in her life. She remembered how proud she felt when it was finally completed, and she remembered how much she believed in the message behind it. She looked at Daniel again. "I think we should step to the side," she said softly. "Of course," he replied. They moved away from the counter, leaving Kelly standing alone, frozen in place. Lena didn't need long to decide her next steps. She had already seen enough. She had experienced enough, and she knew exactly what needed to happen next. But she would handle it with the same calm dignity she carried everywhere she went. When the regional manager stepped through the glass doors, the entire atmosphere of the store shifted. People who had been quietly browsing suddenly slowed their movements, pretending to look at displays while their eyes followed him. The soft music playing in the background no longer felt noticeable. What everyone noticed instead was the way he walked straight toward the woman who had been waiting calmly near the center of the showroom. He greeted her with a warm, respectful tone that made the supervisor freeze where she stood. Until that moment, the supervisor had looked confident, almost pleased with herself, as if she believed she had protected the store from something. But when she heard the manager call the visitor by her name and speak to her with such familiarity, her smile slipped away. She looked from the woman to the manager, trying to understand what was going on. It was clear she hadn't expected this turn of events. The manager asked softly if everything was all right. He didn't raise his voice, and he didn't sound upset, but the seriousness in his expression was clear. The woman answered gently, not sounding angry or emotional. She simply explained what had happened from the moment she walked in, how she had waited to be helped, how the supervisor had spoken to her, and how she had asked for a bracelet only to be dismissed. She didn't exaggerate anything. She didn't add dramatic details. She spoke with calm honesty, someone who didn't need to prove anything. The supervisor jumped in before the woman even finished. She spoke quickly, her voice high and tense, trying to reshape the story so she could look like she had done the right thing. She claimed that the store had strict security guidelines. She said she didn't know who the woman was, that she thought she was just wandering around. She insisted that she had been trying to keep the store safe and that the visitor had looked like she might not be able to afford the items she asked to see. Each word she added only made the situation worse. A few customers raised their eyebrows, clearly recognizing the disrespect. One customer shook his head subtly, while another woman hid a quiet sigh behind her hand. Even the employees behind the counters couldn't hide their discomfort. They had watched the interaction. They knew what had happened. And now they could only stand there, wondering what would come next. The regional manager listened carefully, but it was clear he wasn't impressed by the excuses. He glanced toward the entrance, where two other customers stood frozen, pretending to look at a display of watches while secretly watching the scene unfold. He turned back to the woman and asked her if she needed anything else. She said she didn't need anything besides clarity and fairness. The supervisor seemed to sense that the situation was slipping completely out of her control. She spoke even faster, trying to explain that she hadn't meant any harm. She said she thought she was doing her job, that she had been trying to prevent theft, that she had to make judgment calls. But the more she talked, the more the words tangled together. There was a tremble in her voice now. Her earlier confidence had disappeared. The woman remained calm. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't show anger, but there was a strength in her presence that filled the store. Her calmness said more than shouting ever could. She looked around at the employees who had watched the incident unfold. Some of them looked embarrassed, and others looked relieved that the truth was finally coming out in the open. One young associate, who had recognized her earlier, but had been too afraid to speak up. Lowered his eyes as if he wished he had said something sooner. The regional manager finally turned to the supervisor and asked if she understood who she had been speaking to. The supervisor hesitated, her mouth opening slightly, but no sound coming out. She shook her head slowly. The manager then said the words that caused a slight gasp from two customers standing near the necklace display. He explained that the woman she had dismissed, lectured, and judged was not just any visitor. She was the owner of the entire company. The person who had designed the bracelet she refused to show. The person who had built the brand from the ground up. The supervisor's face went pale and her hands stiffened at her sides. It was as if the air had left her lungs all at once. A long moment of silence filled the store. The kind of silence that makes every sound louder, the soft hum of the lights, the quiet click of the door as another customer hesitated to enter. The soft shifting of someone's shoes on the polished floor. The supervisor tried to speak again, but the words wouldn't come. Her earlier confidence, her dismissive tone, her judgment, everything crumbled as she realized the position she had put herself in. The woman did not gloat. She did not smile. She simply watched the supervisor quietly, as if giving her one last chance to show accountability. But the supervisor stayed frozen, unable to accept responsibility, unable to admit she had made assumptions about someone she didn't know. She kept whispering the same line. She thought she was following store guidelines. She thought she was protecting merchandise. She thought she was doing the right thing. The manager stood beside the owner, waiting for her direction. He respected her silence, knowing she didn't act impulsively. He watched her, waiting for her to speak. The employees behind the counter didn't move. No one wanted to interrupt. The tension was heavy but not explosive. It was a quiet kind of tension, the kind that comes right before the truth settles into place and consequences become clear. The owner finally spoke again. Gently but firmly, she said the issue wasn't about rules. It wasn't about policies. It wasn't about assumptions regarding money or appearance. It was about respect, something that should be offered to every person who walked through those doors. Whether they were the CEO or a passerby who had never seen a luxury store before, she explained that the way people were treated mattered more than the jewelry itself. She said that every customer deserved kindness, patience, and willingness to help. The supervisor clung to her last excuse, saying she had been under stress, that the store had been busy, that she had been trying to manage everything at once. But the owner shook her head gently. Stress didn't excuse disrespect. Busy days didn't excuse assumptions. Nothing excused treating someone as though they didn't belong. The supervisor lowered her eyes, finally sensing that she had run out of explanations. Her shoulders sagged slightly, and her hands trembled a bit. She seemed to realize that the moment she dismissed the woman, she had made a decision that she couldn't undo. The manager asked the owner softly if she wanted to step into the private office, but she shook her head. She said everything that needed to be said could be said right there, in plain sight, so the lesson would be clear. She wanted the staff to understand that integrity was not something hidden behind closed doors. It was something lived out in the open. A few customers nodded subtly, as if agreeing with her words. The young associate who had stayed quiet earlier lifted his eyes again, and this time he looked hopeful. He seemed grateful that the owner had spoken up, not with anger, but with clarity and fairness. The supervisor continued to stand still, barely breathing. She knew what was coming. Everyone in the store knew it too, though no one said a word. The owner didn't drag it out. She didn't shame her. She simply stated that trust had been broken, and that she could not allow someone who judged customers unfairly to lead a team in her store. The words were spoken quietly, but they hit the room with weight. The supervisor swallowed hard. She nodded once, as if she had accepted what she already knew. Her eyes stayed lowered. She didn't argue anymore. She didn't try to defend herself again. The truth was too clear now, and the consequences had unfolded in front of everyone. The manager stepped forward and asked the supervisor to gather her things. She moved slowly, almost in a daze, heading toward the small office in the back. A quiet wave of murmurs moved through the store as she walked away. Not loud gossip, just the natural reactions of people. who had witnessed something unexpected and powerful. The owner stayed where she was, taking a slow breath. The tension in the room began to fade, replaced with a sense of understanding. One customer approached her carefully and thanked her for handling the situation with grace. Another customer smiled and said she admired the way she stood up for fairness without raising her voice. The owner thanked them gently, but she didn't linger. She didn't want attention. She only wanted the message to be clear. She walked over to the young associate who had recognized her earlier. She told him quietly that she appreciated his good customer service, even if he had been hesitant to speak up earlier. His face brightened a little, and he promised he would be braver next time. She smiled sincerely, reminding him that kindness mattered just as much as courage. The manager began addressing the rest of the staff, explaining what had happened and reminding them that every person who entered the store deserved to feel welcome. The associates nodded, some looking thoughtful and others appearing relieved that the truth had finally come out. The owner looked around the store one last time. The jewelry still sparkled under the lights, but now the air felt different, clearer, lighter, as if something heavy had been lifted. She thanked the manager for arriving so quickly, then stepped toward the door. Several customers watched her walk out, still amazed by everything they had just witnessed. As she pushed the glass door open, the soft chime rang again. This time, though, it didn't sound tense or sharp. It sounded peaceful. She stepped outside, took a deep breath of fresh air, and walked calmly toward her car. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. What needed to happen had happened. What needed to be taught had been taught. And inside the store, everyone understood that the moment would stay with them for a long time, not because of the drama, but because of the quiet strength of a woman who chose dignity over anger, fairness over pride, and respect over assumptions. The next morning came quietly, with a soft sunrise that painted the city in gentle colors. The owner woke earlier than usual, her mind still replaying the previous day in small pieces. Not out of anger, and not out of regret, but out of reflection. She had seen many things in her life, but each moment that tested her character reminded her why she had built her company the way she had. She believed in treating people fairly. She believed in giving everyone a chance. And she believed in speaking firmly when something was wrong, but never cruelly. She sat at her kitchen table with a cup of warm tea, the light coming through the window, hitting the surface of the drink and leaving a soft glow. For a long moment, she didn't move. She simply breathed and let the quiet morning settle around her. She knew that the store incident wasn't just an isolated problem. It was a sign that something deeper needed to be addressed across the company. Not with lectures, not with blame, but with changes that would help every store offer the same kindness she had always wanted customers to feel. After finishing her tea, she opened her laptop and typed a message to her assistant. It wasn't a long message. She didn't like long speeches or dramatic announcements. She preferred clarity. She asked her assistant to set up a meeting with all regional managers later in the day. She wanted them gathered in person, not just on a video call. She believed that important conversations should happen face-to-face, where people could look each other in the eye and understand the depth of the message. With that done, she got dressed and took a slow walk outside. The air was cool, fresh, and full of early morning stillness. She greeted the lobby staff in her building, people she had known for years. They always smiled warmly at her, and she always returned the smile. She had learned long ago that kindness made every place brighter. Even simple greetings could lift someone's day. Before the meeting, she stopped by a quiet cafe she liked. It was small and cozy, with wooden tables and warm light fixtures that made the space feel like home. She ordered a simple meal, nothing fancy, and sat at a corner table. Other customers slowly filled the cafe, chatting softly about their plans for the day. She listened without trying to. There was something calming about hearing everyday conversations, simple and human. As she ate, she thought again about the young associate from the store. His face had stayed in her mind, the way he had recognized her, but didn't speak. Not out of indifference, but out of fear of getting in trouble with his supervisor. She wondered how many people in her company felt that way, good people, trying their best, but unsure whether they were allowed to speak up when something felt wrong. She decided she would address that later too. Employees should never be afraid to be kind. When she finished her meal, she left the cafe and headed to her office building. It was tall and modern, with wide glass windows that reflected the sky. She stepped into the lobby where her assistant greeted her with a polite smile and handed her a folder. The meeting room was already being prepared. Water, notepads, pens, everything in place, everything organized. An hour later, the regional managers arrived one by one. Some looked curious. Others looked nervous. They had heard bits and pieces of what happened, but none knew the full story. They sat around the long table quietly, waiting for her to begin. She took her place at the head of the table, not because she needed to be in control, but because she wanted to look each person in the eye as she spoke. She started by explaining the situation from the beginning. Her voice was steady, unhurried, and clear. She told them she had visited one of the stores unannounced, as she often did. She told them she was ignored, dismissed, spoken to with disrespect, and denied the chance to even look at the jewelry her company sold. She didn't say it with frustration. She said it with truth. The room grew silent. Some managers looked down. Others looked shocked. They understood immediately what this meant, not just for the supervisor who had been let go, but for the culture within the company. The owner didn't blame them personally. She didn't raise her voice or point fingers. Instead, she asked a simple but powerful question. How many other customers receive treatment like that without me ever knowing? The question hung in the air for a long moment. She continued, saying she wasn't interested in punishment. She was interested in solutions. She wanted training programs that actually mattered, ones focused on empathy, not scripts. She wanted supervisors who understood leadership wasn't about authority. It was about service. She wanted every customer, from every background, to feel at home in her stores. Not just welcomed, but valued. The managers nodded, some slowly, some immediately. They understood the importance of what she was saying. She had always led with heart, and now she wanted the entire company to follow that same path. She explained that the new training would begin the following week. She wanted everyone involved, from part-time staff to supervisors to district teams, no exceptions. She believed everyone had something to learn. The meeting lasted for more than an hour. Questions were asked. Ideas were shared. She listened to every suggestion, even the imperfect ones, because she valued effort. When the meeting ended, she thanked them for attending and reminded them that leadership wasn't measured by how many rules they enforced, but by how many people felt supported under their guidance. After they left, she stayed in the room for a while. She looked out the window at the busy street below. Cars moved in steady lines, people walked along sidewalks, and life continued as usual. But inside her mind, she felt a sense of peace. She knew the changes she was making would reach far beyond one store. They would shape how every customer felt the moment they stepped into any of her locations. In the afternoon, she drove to another one of her stores, not to inspect, not to judge, but simply to observe. She wanted to see how customers were treated when no one knew she was watching. She walked in quietly, again dressed casually, blending into the flow of people. Immediately, a young associate approached her with a kind smile, asking if she needed help. The moment was so gentle and respectful that it warmed her heart. She knew this associate had no idea who she was. He was simply doing his job with kindness. She thanked him and walked through the aisles. Watching as staff helped others with patience and warmth, an older woman was trying to choose a necklace for her granddaughter, and a staff member helped her without rushing, even offering to clean her glasses so she could see the details better. A father and his son were looking at a small silver bracelet, and the staff member crouched down so she could speak to the boy at his eye level. The owner smiled softly. This was the experience she wanted people to have. As she walked around, she noticed the store manager approaching her. The manager greeted her politely and asked if she needed assistance. Again, there was kindness, but not pressure. She liked that. She asked a few questions about the new collection to see how the manager handled them. The responses were thoughtful and patient. When she left the store, she felt lighter. She knew there were many good people in her company, people who treated others with respect because it was natural to them, not because they were told to. Later that evening, back at home, she sat on the couch and reflected on everything once more. The quiet hum of the city drifted through her window. She thought about how a single moment in a jewelry store, moment filled with assumptions and unfair judgment, had turned into something much bigger. It had become an opportunity for growth. Not just for the supervisor who lost her job, not just for the staff who watched it unfold, but for the entire company. She didn't celebrate the supervisor's termination. She didn't find satisfaction in it. She only felt clarity. People deserved to be treated well. Customers deserved to feel welcome. And employees deserved leaders who reminded them of that every day. She hoped the supervisor, wherever she was now, would reflect too. Growth often came from difficult moments. She wished her well despite what happened. A few hours later, her phone buzzed. It was the young associate from the store where the incident had happened. He had gotten her contact information through the regional manager and sent a short message, thanking her for encouraging him to speak up. He told her that he wanted to do better, that he had learned something important, that he hoped she didn't regret speaking kindly to him even in the middle of a stressful moment. She smiled as she read the message. She responded with a simple, encouraging note, reminding him that kindness was never wasted, and courage always grew with practice. The night grew quieter. The owner stood by the window, looking at the city lights. She didn't think of herself as powerful, even though others sometimes did. She didn't think of herself as someone above anyone. She simply saw herself as a person who wanted fairness to be the foundation of everything she touched. As she closed her curtains and prepared for bed, she felt a deep sense of peace. The story that began with disrespect had ended with clarity, change, and hope. The people in her company would learn from it. She would continue shaping her stores into places where everyone felt valued. And she knew that the next time she walked into any of her locations unannounced, it wouldn't matter what she wore, how she looked, or whether anyone knew her title. She would still be treated the way every human deserved to be treated. With that thought, she turned off the lights and let the quiet of the night wrap around her. A new day would come tomorrow, and she would continue her work steady, patient, and driven by the belief that respect, when practiced daily, could change more than a store. It could change people.